It's me, Patrick from Outrageous Insight here. How are you? I hope you are well. Now, my guest today is not the English professional athlete currently plying his trade on the British independent wrestling scene, but instead his namesake, Mark Haskins. Mark, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Did you know there was an English professional wrestler named Mark Haskins?
I've had people try to look me up and always get to those images, so it's a bit of a shock. Yeah, I had to do it myself, Google myself one time after hearing someone look me up and saying that. So yeah, it's I don't know. Is he still on the circuit? I don't know if he's still on the circuit or not.
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not a huge sort of semi-pro wrestling fan. But for those of you that are listening rather than watching this podcast, I'm delighted to report that the real Mark Haskins in front of me here is significantly better sort of built than Mark Haskins, the professional wrestler, Mark. So great to have you on. Now, Mark, the real Mark, the OG Mark, is a footwear veteran and VP of Global Product Design who helped the brand Vans grow from 250 million to 4 billion in revenue. Mark is also the creator of the La Corsa Grand Prix board game. And as a massive board game nerd, Mark, I have to ask you first and foremost, what is the game like to play?
Well, it's fun, of course. It has to be, but it's a great introduction to Formula One. It's great for Formula One fans and their family, and it breaks down the Formula One strategy and tactics down to like a really simple card mechanism, a card resource management game that determines track position. And it's just a battle of who can be, say, in front, and it's very head to head and quite lively. And it's a blast to play.
I love that. And are you a competitive gamer yourself? Are you a good loser, Mark, or are you basically like, I play to win and there's no messing about?
I've become a good loser, I think, over time. Mostly because when we get our friends together, we're trying to perfect things in the game. So I'm doing it more from an analytical point than trying to outright beat everybody. But yeah, I'm just a very competitive person in general. This project really combines all my design, my love of design, my love of competition. I'm also a triathlete, so I like to compete on many different things. And my love of racing. So that's really how the project came about.
And also, we were just talking in the sort of green room, although it's not a green room, it's more like a sort of like a web page before the flag drops and the lights go out, as it were, about your love of sort of classic GP and Grand Prix sort of typography and font and design. Just give us a little sense of like how important that sort of aesthetic is to you as well, Mark.
Well, it's super important. The game is based on Italians' passion for motor racing and all the kind of art and design that they've provided that. And even if you look at some of those old Grand Prix posters by Max Huber, that was a huge inspiration for all the stuff I put together. So typefaces and poster graphic and also the car design were super important to get that sort of classic, timeless feel to. So yeah, that really gets it across the line when you pay attention to all those details.
And people don't really realize just how difficult it is to do something simple in a beautiful way, do they? They think like, oh, simple is easy. And it's like, no, simple and understated. And, whether it's, Grand Prix liveries on a chassis, or whether it's the Vignelli cannon, for example, it's like the design that lasts is that design that is very like sort of simple, but it's very hard to execute properly.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, it took me 2 years of real study and design and just research. Thank God for Wikipedia. Just all that old Formula One stuff. It just really intrigues me, and I think it's beautiful and classic and timeless. It takes a bit of work to get there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And in fact, I'm just back from Paris with our daughter. We went for the first time taking her there this weekend, and like the sort of use of type in Paris is unbelievable. I mean, it's the metro signs, it's the historical signs that are up. I mean, even the sort of road names are just beautifully executed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they still kept a lot of their design language too. You know, some of the old Metropolitan, Art Nouveau, stations are just wonderfully preserved and really nice to see too. So it's not just one simple style, but every style that's there is executed perfectly.
Yeah, and isn't it also the use of light? Like, I mean, here, if you've ever travelled on the tube in London, it's like being sort of, like you've been carjacked. You go on the metro in Paris, and it's like somebody's holding me, giving me a hug, telling me that they've put beautiful music and lighting on. Like, we went to the one of the stations, I think there are 3 or 4 around the Louvre Museum, and like they've now got artifacts from the museum actually embedded into the wall, like backlit.
Oh wow!
And it is so beautiful. And it's like we would never do that in the UK. Like we're so design lazy. And then France and Italy and Spain and Portugal and some of those countries, like just Morocco, just really lean into it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think there's been some great British work done too on road signs and things like that. But sometimes it's in the execution of how they get placed, and it kind of falls apart there. So it's always a little bit on your political infrastructure. Sometimes that depends whether good design makes it to the consumer.
Yeah, isn't it? And it's also, but it's also some of that sort of upkeep part as well. Like you get the sense that the way in which public infrastructure is maintained in France, for example, is very different. Like here, like every street sign is dirty. So few of them are sort of like upkept. Whereas in France, it'd be like, that is a crime against the Republic,
Right. They take it very, very seriously. Yeah. I mean, it's the same if you go to Japan, right? You can see the cultures that really take pride in how they present themselves. Yeah.
Well, you're about to get me talking about watches, Mark, which will basically get us both into trouble because I'm currently on a watch ban. I'm not allowed to bring any more watches or Japanese-inspired sort of design artifacts into the house. So let's sort of move away from that before I basically check with my mouth that my body can't cash. Tell us, Mark, it's so great to have you here. What were you like as a child? Like, give us a bit of an insight into you as a young person.
Yeah, well, I was, I'm definitely an introvert, and I think my passion for cars came about pretty early. Maybe 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. I started collecting brochures. The one beautiful thing about being in Southern California is there's a lot of exotic cars and great cars. And as kids, we used to ride our bikes down to Newport Beach and collect car brochures and try to, see if we could swindle a Rolls Royce one or whatever it might be that they weren't so happy to give out. But it was really, it was just kind of a thing we did, and I collected old, like a scrapbook kind of thing of car adverts and things like that. And, at some point I found out through reading Auto Week that there was actually a school you go to for car design. And I was lucky to learn that very early, probably in my freshman year in high school. So, many people get a full degree and then go to Art Center, and I was lucky to kind of find out about it at an early age. So that seemed like something I really locked onto, maybe a little bit too much, letting my grades slip, but by getting my art skills back to where they needed to be able to apply there. And so that was kind of my journey into design, and it really came through automobiles. But I think at Art Center, that was where I really developed a love of design in total, both, like all the stuff we do with the graphic design, which, we did a lot at Vans as well. And kind of building my skills as a complete designer.
And I mean, the sort of the sort of cultural reference points that you're drawing from there, Southern California, I'm thinking about the the Duel film by Spielberg. I'm thinking about so many different inspirations being drawn here, and I would like you to just talk to me a little bit. You've gone to this school. You're about to make a decision that we're going to talk about on this podcast, but can you just talk to me a little bit about what the status quo was before your decision? Like, where were you at in your life, Mark?
I mean, I think, it's, I love sports. So I think we've talked a little bit about, just kind of where my passions are, but sports, Formula One was a big thing. And it was something very rare to like here. You kind of had to get bits and pieces on the weekends. We didn't get full coverage of Grand Prix or anything like that. You got the Indy 500 and a few local things, but I was kind of like building like, sport. I was a tremendous soccer fan, football fan, if you will. And my mother's actually English, so I had I had the full Subbuteo kit. I had so all these things that were a little bit odd, I think, as a Southern California kid. But that was kind of shaping me, this sort of like toys, games, cars, competition, and ultimately design was the thing that kind of was sort of the vehicle to carry me into these worlds, I think. So once I got to, I was lucky enough that Pasadena is not that far away from here. It was about an hour drive, 2 hours with traffic, but that's sort of the LA thing. But once I got to that gallery, and many people talk about like going to the Art Center, College of Design, and visiting the gallery there as a prospective student, and just absolutely being blown away. Just the quality of work, just it looks so futuristic. These essentially, undergrads building these cars, rendering them, modeling them, just everything about it was so interesting to me. And as soon as I went, I think I visited the school as a sophomore, and I just had to go. It was just the one thing that I could really, I was not the best student. So, no one was saying, hey, go to Berkeley, go to MIT. No one was saying that. So this was the thing that I could really latch onto and see myself going to and performing well at, as big a challenge as it ended up being.
Yeah, fascinating. And what sort of time was this, Mark? What sort of year are we talking about here? Just to give us a bit of context.
Well, this does determine, the outcome and my path that I took, which was, so I went there in 1988. Was when I started. I graduated in 91, and not many people remember 91, but there was not much of a car business at the time. Very, very poor economic downturn, not a lot of jobs in the industry. Now, I would say that actually quite a few of my classmates did end up getting car design jobs, but they had the patience to wait it out for a year or two and travel to Europe and visit all the studios. And that's just not something I was able to do. So I was like, well, what else is interesting? And like I said, I developed sort of a love of just design in general, something that I didn't have going into school, but because of my love of cars, it kind of exposed me to that world. And a lot of industrial designers were being picked up by Nike at the time. Were coming in and taking car design students and product design students. And so that all of a sudden seemed like a really cool possibility. And I just sort of wiggled my way into that world a little bit. I find footwear and sneakers in general just tremendously fascinating. And even if I compare like my career to others that did end up in the car design world, I think we had a lot more fun, a lot more design satisfaction, very, very immediate in footwear, where you design something and a few weeks later you see the results of that. Whereas, in automotive design, you could be waiting 2 years to see your door handle. It's not maybe always the most satisfying, and very few get to style their own car. So I think I made a pretty good choice there. And it's, footwear, endlessly fascinating. I'm not sure it's quite what it was in those early 90s, and probably through the first 10 years of the 2000s. But at that time, it was fantastic and super exciting. And I think about, some of those first industrial designers and what they were doing in the industry, whether it's like Armadas or, one of my favorites is a friend of mine, Stephen Smith, the Pump Fury, which I think when I first got in the industry and I saw that at a trade show, I'm like, oh, this is like a Formula One car, as a shoe. And I really was like, yes, I'm in the right place. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw the Hirachi. I felt the same. I was
Yeah.
that is I'm going to swear, that is a fucking good looking sneaker. And I want that. And like, I was never in a household where we could afford to or would buy American sneakers. It was all like, like sort of what I guess Americans would sort of almost term like sort of like dad barbecue sneakers.
Yeah.
It was like lowest cost sort of Reebok or Dunlop Green Flash or those sorts of things. But I saw the Hirachi, I remember it so clearly, and thinking like, oh my god, just whatever it takes, I want those shoes. And some of them have held up so well. And it's interesting hearing you talk about the sort of both the parallels with automotive, but also I guess the sort of context in which you're designing, and it sort of the sort of rise of music videos, the skate and surf scene, countercultural movements like Adbusters and other things like that. And I guess when you were starting out in the industry, how aware were you of those sort of contextual pieces, Mark?
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, I think maybe as a automotive designer, I was a little bit more in tune with the fashion world a little bit. And so, when it came to, picking a cutout of a model to stand next to your car, your scale model car, that was something like, what was she wearing? What, and a lot of like the mood boards and things we put together for our projects, I definitely was going through like Elle magazine, which I'm not sure everybody was. But just to get that sort of thing. But yeah, there was, I mean, just in design in general, Southern California, I always felt we were a little bit ahead design wise and culturally wise. There was so many things going on. So even when I moved back east to work for Reebok, I always felt we had a little bit of an advantage over, particularly New Englanders, I suppose, are not known for their fashion forwardness, but it did feel like, it was a little bit easier for us to kind of, tie into those kind of different moments.
Hey, it's Patrick at Outrageous Insight. Thanks for watching the show. I want to talk to you today about the Consumer Delight Diagnostic. This is a 90-minute structured interview that I run that measures the health of consumer insight inside your business. You'll find out what's working, where the gaps are, and where to start. And most leaders have never seen this picture. The fee is fixed, $2,500, and link is in the show notes, or you can email me. We only had 4 television channels when I was growing up, Mark, and my sister and I were obsessed with anything American. And the thing that we were most obsessed with was the fact that Americans always got their groceries in brown paper bags. And we would just say to our mum, every single time she went to the superstore, we'd be like, Mum, please don't get plastic. Just get like a brown paper bag. And like, that was not a thing in the UK. And she was just like, just stop badgering me about the fucking brown bags. All right. But we just thought like that was the height of sort of American sophistication that, like 9021 Shannon Doherty always had like her groceries in like a sort of brown paper bag. And we were like, we want to be like Shannon Doherty. Just basically bring it back in brown paper bags.
That's funny. Well, I mean, yeah, it's these little details that you pick up on, when you're younger, you wouldn't really think of it otherwise, right? It's just something so new and different, and it's a little bit like I was a big media head when I was a kid too. I watched a lot of TV, and I still do, maybe in a different form now, but still, like I was very influenced by TV and things I saw that were different, and it's a little bit of escapism, but also you get to see what other cultures are doing. And it's the same in some ways. It's a little window on travel and the experiences you get when you travel and you see things that are done so differently. But if you go to Japan and you get your coffee in a vending machine, it's just something it's so odd and amazing, really, as an outsider to see how that's done, and you can really get enthralled by it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, after my Paris trip, and I'd seen it before, but seeing the fact that the cathedral at Notre Dame, which had been subject to this massive ruinous fire, thinking about the fact that it was built over say 50 to 100 years, I don't know precisely, but it had taken a long time. And then a national effort, like a sort of Kennedy style moonshot says, we're going to rebuild this thing in 4 years, 5 years. It's a miracle. I mean, it's unbelievable when you see what human ingenuity can actually do, even if it's not quite pastiche, but it's certainly like recreation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to have a boss that was Italian, and he had a degree in architectural reconstruction, and the levels of thought that go into what should we preserve? Did we wipe off this 16th century art to get to the 14th century art underneath? Is such a funny thing. But certainly older cultures than ours are very particular about how they treat their history and their really design legacy.
The thing I love most about doing this show is the chance to talk with leaders about a decision that they may never have spoken about before. Now, this might sound like a podcast party trick, but I promise you it isn't. In fact, it's the same skill that allows you to unlock what your consumers truly want and need. And using that raw data, you can then build more franchise products. The problem is that most brands have currently lost this. Insight teams have been cut, while the number of consumer questions and questions about consumers have only multiplied. And it means that most leaders have no idea where they stand. Closing that gap starts with the Consumer Delight Diagnostic, a structured interview that I run with you that allows me to score your team's insight capabilities and shows you exactly where you stand fast. 90 minutes, fixed fee, $2,500, no pitch. If you're serious about earning your consumer's delight, it starts here. Get in touch at outrageousinsight.com. Well, this is really good, Mark, because I sent you the questions in advance. I told you everything I was going to ask you, and then I've asked you almost none of the questions I've sent you in advance. Do you feel like I've completely and utterly stitched you up?
No, this is great. I mean,
You're doing great. You're really doing great, Mark. I'm just saying you're a great guest. You're very engaging. Like the birds, and is it a bird in the back? Is it your bird, or is it is it just nature in the background?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff, and I think this window opens to our little corner yard, so it's again a beautiful day in Southern California, and people are buzzing around out there. We got birds and cats and squirrels, and actually I've been seeing a lot of really interesting, colorful birds this time of year, which is a little bit unusual.
Yeah, we've got a French cat called Mr. Pudding. And he's very, very fluffy. He looks like a Russian blue. He's actually
very cool.
He's actually a French breed called a Chartreux. And the thing is, he's so I'm so lovely. I just love basically just giving love to everyone I meet. But he's also a fucking killer. So he's had he's had a deer. He's had a robin. He's had a sparrow, a starling. He's even got a squirrel the other day. He is absolutely rock solid, Mark. And we were chatting earlier about sort of favourite sports stars and about the name Lars and about why we thought that was such a solid name. You never meet an unsolid Lars, do you?
Right. That's the hope for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's
Yeah, it's funny. Well, we don't let our cats outside here because they will be eaten by coyotes. There's a few in the neighborhood that can survive, but not many. So it's a different thing. That we have my cat also is a killer when it gets outside, but it's not outside very often.
Tune in next week, folks, for the Ted Bundy of Cats episode, which is going to be really great. Yeah. Solitary Sister, is there still a part of you that wants to live, as Seal once famously told us? Killer. Right, let's move on. So, Mark, what was the decision that you took? So you got to this point. What was the decision you actually decided to take?
Well, I think it's less of a, sometimes those decisions are made for you a little bit. So I got out of art center. I mean, one thing I can say about even that, even if you're not getting into car design or your specific major, your background is really flawless. It's really well put together. You've got skills to just about do anything. And one of the reasons I chose car design is a little bit because of the styling factor over product design. I mean, we're getting a great view on the difference between a car designer and a product designer when you look at the new Ferrari EV. So that those skills I think are invaluable and something you can take definitely to footwear design, but also many other industries. So I was very happy with that education, and my contacts there have proved tremendously important.
And you've been one of the no, go on. Sorry, Mark. I was going to just
no, go ahead.
I leapt in too soon. No, go on. You go.
No, okay. But so once you like, what other options are there? And footwear was the one that really stuck out to me. A lot of people were medical equipment or whatever, things that just had not a lot of passion to them. I suppose if I was smart and really ambitious, I would have got into some sort of computer thing, knowing it's probably not a bad idea to go where the money is. But at that time, footwear those jobs seemed amazing, fun, well paid, great sort of I don't know, like just the culture around sports and things like that seemed to really fit with kind of my background and my experiences. And so, I looked around for wherever I could get my toes dipped in the pool there, because, you're just trying to figure out, like, sure, I'd like to go work for Nike, but it seemed like that might be a little bit tricky. So I had a buddy working at LA Gear, and I had done a side project for LA Gear, and eventually kind of moved around a little bit. I worked for a small brand called Capa in Texas. So that was a little bit of a shock for a Southern California kid to be in San Antonio. And that didn't last too long, but eventually I sort of made my way back east because that's where the jobs were. So I spent a lot of time, doing contract work, out of work, just trying to find, how I could get started. And I eventually worked for a small shop in New England, ADC. They were kind of a consultant to Converse, Timberland, you name it, really. I mean, they kind of they were doing stuff for everybody. I think there were a couple old New Balance guys.
Design work.
Yeah, design work. They would basically, it was kind of funny because they were a couple merchandisers, sort of my first dealings with merchandisers. And they would kind of do these little sketches. Neither one were trained in any way. But they sort of, a combination of looking at other people's catalogs and things like that. And they give you something. And then we basically were the production team. We basically rendered them, made them look like real shoes. And that's basically the product they sold. So I worked there for about 8 months, and it was, it was a bit of a learning experience, both for New England and also just a little bit of window into industry. But it was nice because we got to go, we got to go to Timberland, we got to go to Converse and see what that looked like at a bigger scale. Because I'd only worked with really small brands. I mean, LA Gear was kind of transitioning from a big brand to a small brand, but But I would say, like, looking at the inside of Timberland was kind of an interesting experience, and um, figured out, okay, this is definitely something I want to do.
And without naming names, but one does see the good, the bad, and the ugly when one works with sporting apparel and footwear brands, don't you? You see a real gamut. I mean, we certainly see it with our clients, all
Yeah.
of whom are wonderful, of course, Mark. But it's that sort of, the culture shapes the product, shapes the cadence, shapes the sort of reverence or otherwise that is given to consumer insight, shapes the way in which one can actually challenge uncomfortable insight when it comes up. Like, it's not just about the product or the design, is it?
No, it is often about the culture, and I think that's what kind of sets all these brands apart, and that's also what makes them, gives them a reason for being as well. I mean, if you think about Timberland, for instance, I mean, it seems very similar to how it was when I first saw them in the early '90s, and that may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing, but they're definitely authentic to themselves. And if we did some work with Solomon way back when, and that just the way they approach the technicality of the product has kind of been the same. It's, you see it in today's product, that they had sort of a method, and they had very strict guidelines of how they did the technical performance of the shoes themselves, particularly in running. But yeah, very interesting to see how that carries over, especially through time. And that was one of the big things about Vans too, was, hey, this is a culture that is it's something more than just shoes.
To nick the Barcelona Football Club, more than just a club. So, Mark, let's get into this. Or maybe it's Real Madrid. I can never remember. I don't know anything about global football. So let's just move on. So Vans was a really significant part of your then sort of, tenure within the industry, and obviously now, outside but still consulting within the industry. But tell us about your sort of challenge that you faced at Vans, and sort of how what sort of principles you decided to sort of apply to starting to explore that challenge, Mark.
Yeah, I might do that just by contrasting a little bit from where I was coming from, because I eventually did from that small consultancy work for Reebok, and I did their global football boots for 3 years but 4 seasons. So we crammed a lot into that time, working with Ryan Giggs and Bergkamp. Bergkamp scored his sort of famous sort of over the head shot against Argentina in my boots. And so that was really where I leveraged my sporting background and into like a professional design culture. So the contrast of like thinking about, well, how do I go from that to Vans might seem like, I mean, it was a pretty big jump. And I would say, even being a SoCal native, a little bit like you, my mom bought, knockoff Vans. So, I didn't feel like I was fully part of that culture, even though I was from there. Now, cats.
Just give a shout out to the cat names. What have you got there, Mark?
We've got a Madonna.
Okay, Madonna.
Named by the kids. So we have all the famous female divas in our range. We have Lady Gaga and Jewel as well. So
Jewel.
You can kind of see how that goes.
If I could turn back the hands of time, that's Cher, but I know Jules, like every time I hear Jules singing, it just makes me cry. And it reminds me of sort of being at what you call college, what we call university, back in the late 90s, and just listening to that on repeat as my heart was broken, Mark. So that and Tony Braxton, Unbreak My Heart, still makes
very
me
nice,
cry.
yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah, well, you got to get it out.
Have I overshared?
You were fine. You were fine on this side. Yeah. So going from Reebok to Vans, it was a little scary for me. It was, moving back to California, something I wanted to do, but also a little intimidated. I had such a nice advantage being in New England as a Californian. So coming back, was like, okay, I might have to catch up a little bit. And for sure with skate culture and everything that was going on at that time, particularly Vans, it was a little bit of an adjustment. And even the lack of professionalism within design in that company was a little bit shocking. I didn't have a computer for the first 6 months, and I draw by hand quite well, but that was a little bit weird. It was like, oh, this is not the standard I'm used to. And Vans was going through a really interesting time. I mean, that was 1998, so the business was not big, as you mentioned. It was losing money, and everything was somewhat tenuous, I would say, for the first few years there. And I often thought about abandoning ship, but California is a great place to be. So if you can be there, you try to stay. And what happened a little bit over time, we were trying to compete with skate shoes, but we were a little bit outside the DCs and the Etnies that were a little bit more core. They didn't have this sort of baggage of their legacy, and they also didn't sell to the mid-tier channels, so they were able to keep it a little bit more authentic and genuine at the top. So there was a need to really kind of step that up, segment the markets a little bit more, pay more attention to the core, but still everything was a little bit hard to make to the next step. But one thing that was really interesting to me when I got there is, a Southern California kid, he wants to come back to Vans and buy a pair of Checkerboard slip-ons. And we did not make them. Maybe you could get a pair at the warehouse sale. Kind of, that was like dead stock inventory that they would give to employees. But they weren't carried at our many retail locations, and I always found that a little strange. This is my chance.
What was it like? What was it like when you sort of said, "Hey, folks, have you ever thought about bringing these things back?"
Well, I can't say it was just me, but there was quite a few of us that were like, "Yeah, this is a very strange situation. Like, why don't we do these?" And you dig into the problem a little bit deeper, and just before I got there, they changed from manufacturing in the USA to doing it overseas, Korea specifically. But they didn't have any of the technical people from the factory, handle that process. So they just sent a shoe over to Korea and expected it to come back the way it was in the US. And of course, that was never done. And so those shoes lost their relevance, and they lost their essence of what they were to the US market. And so as we sort of dug into that, well, there's a few things we had seen in the marketplace, particularly through the late 90s and early 2000s, that the fashion industry was kind of gravitating to these types of shoes. They were finding them and using them in runway shows. So there was definitely this cultural connection we knew was missing. So it was really just about exploiting that as we went forward. Adding more current artwork to the vamps of slip-ons, and most importantly, I think, making them the right way. So digging down into the details, cutting shoes apart, seeing how they were made back then, and figuring out how they needed to be made. At this point, so much time had gone by that the idea of a Vans was almost like this vintage product anyway. It was something that they had kept for 10 years, and it didn't exactly look the way it did when it first made. So there was that issue that we needed to address a little bit. And when it comes to making the last for the current run of shoes for the last 30 years, is really based on sort of this idea of a vintage product. So it's a flatter last. It has the shape of what those shoes look like after a little bit of aging. And so that's a really weird kind of thing. But once we changed and slip on to that last, we saw sales immediately change. And we started doing it with other models. We did the authentic, the old school. And as we changed that last to those different models, we then saw the uptake in those. So at that point, we knew we were onto something, and we just put more fuel to the fire essentially, and kept doing more with it, more colors, more patterns, trying to really explore what we could do. And I would say even to this day, there's that sort of within the designers there's still this sort of experimentation. What else can I change about this shoe? What can I do with the foxing tape? What can I do with the interior of the shoe, the labeling? Everything is kind of open game, which can make it a little bit hard from a merchandiser's perspective, because the options are really limited on such a simple product. But it's a super fun. It was a super fun time to kind of go through that growth period, and that fueled the entire growth of the company, to be honest.
So you bring back this icon, let's call it my words, not yours. How does one have reverence for that without it becoming, again, my words, not yours, but like a sort of albatross, like a sacred cow that can't be challenged? Like that is something that so many brands from mass market to luxury sort of grapple with, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting subject. I would say, when you a lot of brands do forget their past a little bit, and you always have new people coming in that just accept that this is how it's always been. So, two things to that is first you do need an icon. I think to be a relevant brand, it definitely helps to have some icons, that have kind of proved themselves, and it sort of establishes your DNA of what are the characteristics of those products, and then how do you move forward, after that. So it's good to have those icons, establish them. I think good business practice as well. So there's that, but then there's the people that come in after you've established the icon and think that's all there is, and don't realize that it's, there was a lot of manufacturing and fiddling with it to get it to where it is today, where it's relevant for today's market. So all, like I said, it's not the same last that was used in the 80s. It's completely different. And then there becomes this fanaticism around the icon, or in Vans' case, a few icons, that then becomes hard to do anything else after. No, we're just going to stick with these 5 shoes. And, to my mind, that's not a sustainable business practice. You can grow it. And I would say Vans probably had the best success at this. So you do it 15 years of growth off, essentially 4 or 5 products is amazing. That's really great execution, both from a marketing standpoint and from a product standpoint. But there's a limit. There's a limit to it, because to keep the authenticity of the brand, you can't just sell everywhere. And you could see even during my time there was a lot of cannibalization of product. The ones that we sold at lower tier became more and more like the authentic versions that we sold, higher up the chain. So that's not forever. You can't do that forever. You need new product. Footwear has changed so much, in the last 20 years in terms of, if you look at running styles and like even the fashion, and, we were great with tight pants and we're not so great with bigger pants. These things are there. It's a constant moving target. So bigger, bulkier, more comfortable. And, we had done a ton of insights on comfort. And of course, nobody wants to admit that the Vans slip-on is not a comfortable shoe. I mean, it is in many ways, but not in the typical sense that's being evaluated now. So you have to deal with those realities, and it makes it very hard for a brand to kind of push into the next thing, because they're always worried about undermining their core icons, and that's tremendously challenging. There's a lot of
hidebound by the past.
Yes, exactly. And there's a lot of things you can do. And we did a lot of work with BMW Design Works in terms of building sort of a creative language to take the essence and the characteristics of what is in that core product and what people love about it, and translate that to newer products. But I think within within the company, the company itself, because all these people came after we had established that icon, that was kind of, they just had a different way of looking at it. And they just could not get their heads around, you know, even an honest interpretation of what could be next was always cut or unsupported, I would say, more importantly. And you can't do new things without supporting them.
Yeah. And when people are afraid to not lose rather than to try and win, again, that's a huge problem.
Well, it's absolutely right, and it shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be an either or, right? It should be a core product and the new stuff, and they should work in harmonious ways and be able to, you know, kind of further the reach of the brand to more consumers and more activities and more, you know, wear occasions, if you will. But it was very hard. It was very hard. And it's just like the worst critic was always the internal people. It was never the customer. When we asked the customer, yeah, we love that. We would love this from Vans. But you know, the internal thing was always, nope, we can't support that.
Yeah. Mark, our time is nearly at an end. So I'm going to just sort of not rattle through, but just sort of gently nudge us through these final 3 questions before our time will have to end, and I will sing you away with a song. How does that sound? Does that sound okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Sounds quite sinister, doesn't it, the way I say it? So just reflecting back sort of briefly on the fascinating story that you've just told, like, what do you think current folks in sporting apparel or footwear can learn? What do you think is, like, if you had to reflect on one single sort of teachable lesson that you think came up off the back of that experience, what would that be for you, Mark?
I mean, that's probably the toughest question you're going to ask me. I think it's very difficult, especially from a design perspective. It's, you're always an advocate. You're always an advocate for new things and new thinking, and you do have to stay very open. Your job becomes more about selling that vision as you go, and as these companies become more entrenched. I have to say, it's not always possible. You know, you could go to the ends of the earth and the best possible job. You could have, you know, Johnny Ivy come in and tell you how to do it, but it is very difficult to kind of move a company along that way. I think broader than just design, I think it's really being open to where the company can go, and know that there's no set answer, because the market is changing all the time. It's changing how it looks at you. It's changing what other things it sees, and culture in general. You know, fashion is always changing. And we've seen it with Nike. I mean, you know, all of a sudden the influencer was super important, but it caused them to change something. They lost something in that change too. So the balance is incredibly difficult to navigate.
And some brands can't be saved, can they? I mean, I think that's what I'm hearing from you, is that one can go to the mat, one can fight, but sometimes it's a bit like a bad relationship. I'm not saying that you've said that, but some clients, some engagements, some jobs, it's like, this just can't be turned around by this group of people that are here with this group of owners, this group of investors. It's just, sometimes the harmonics just aren't right, or the market isn't.
Yeah, right. Absolutely true. I mean, there are no win situations for sure. And I think, you know, particularly for designers, you find yourselves in those more often than not. You know, I would say this is a problem with just brands in general, is that the expertise sort of shifts from the people who have done it and know it to, you know, as a vice president of design, having to listen to the decision that's being made by, you know, a 20-year-old, because it's their business, essentially their category, their business. That's not a way to win. I mean, it's just not. I mean, even on the business side, I mean, with 30 years of business, to not be able to impart that to the strategy of that category, or that, you know, is really difficult. I mean, obviously you have to have great partners, and I always did at Vans, that were my colleagues and my equals in either merchandising or marketing. But on the day-to-day level, it becomes very difficult to navigate that. And as much support as you might get, those are difficult situations. That's when you have to decide if this is really winnable, if this is really
where you want to make your
something
stand.
you want to be doing. Yeah. I mean, do you want to trust your own instincts for a change? Becomes the question.
So my heart is breaking even further, and I may actually break into a bit of Toni Braxton at the end, because I think we can both agree she is a top class, I was going to say athlete, but I mean musician. Hey, Toni, if you want to come on the podcast, I would love to have you on. We could talk about Silk's nightclub in York, in Yorkshire in England, and me walking down the stairs at this nightclub as your song played in the background, and I saw Lisa at the bottom of the stairs crying after we'd just broken up. I've overshared. Mark, I'm going to switch the last two questions around, and then we'll finish up. So
okay,
you've shared so generously today, and I really, really thank you for just really opening up your brain and your influences and your eye and your expertise to the audience and to me. So thank you so, so much. It's been a huge, huge pleasure.
Oh, thank you. Very fun. Very fun to do this.
Tell me, what is your ask for the audience? Like, what would you like people to do? And, the floor is yours. The microphone is yours.
Oh, well, I mean, it's good. I mean, the one thing you can't, again, I'm going to say particularly design, but you have to have passion for what you're working on. When that passion's not there, you have to go find something else to do. So that should always remain the core of your existence in creating things. If you can't see it, I mean, there's a lot of things I'm passionate about, which I think I'm kind of lucky, whether it's football or running, triathlon, design, board games. You got to find that thing that really makes you excited. Otherwise, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it because everything is a struggle. Even the higher you go up in the corporation, which many people will find, it's all fun and games when you're at the bottom, and then it gets more and more of a struggle as you go to the top. So you have to be passionate about it. That's first and foremost. So that's really my advice for anybody. If I look a little bit past that, I would say at some point you do need to be kind of the owner of the vessel, if you will. That it's really difficult to work for people who maybe don't have the expertise you do, and at that point you have to kind of have to do it for yourself, improve yourself, whether that's being a contractor or whether that's being running your own show. But I highly recommend it, running your own business, particularly from a design standpoint. You have a lot of the skills needed to succeed. That vision and industrial designers, if you can look at margins and you can balance a budget, you're just as good as anybody else out there.
I absolutely love that. And obviously, again, such wise words, with so many people either, experiencing layoffs or trying to get into these industries, or thinking about, how do we respond to AI and all of this sort of technological revolution around us. So this idea of like being master or mistress of your own ship, master of your own destiny.
Yep.
And I know you're doing some really, really fascinating work with the La Corsa game, and we'll definitely link to that as well. But, really worth having a look at, because you'll see Mark's eye in this. And actually, don't just look at the game, like look at the details, look at the typography, think about why has Mark made these decisions, and you'll actually learn a lot as a designer. So thank you for sharing that with the world as well, Mark. That's really, really
Thank you,
appreciated.
Patrick. I appreciate that. That's nice of you to say. Yeah, I hopefully the passion does come through in the product. It was certainly a lot of passion put into it, and it's nice when people can see that.
Please never make this your strap line, but maybe it could be like board game recognizes board game. Just move on. Just move on.
That's good.
Hashtag dad joke. As we said about our cat the other day, small cat body, big cat mindset. So that's how we've described Mr. Pudding. Mark, final question to you, and then we'll finish up. But who would you like to see next being interviewed on here? And I mean, it's anybody is open, but is there somebody that you think deserves a wider audience that should be heard from? And if so, who would you say that person is?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say that, I sort of name dropped Stephen Smith a little bit, but I think he's already got a pretty wide audience. Maybe he doesn't need any more exposure. But he's a very different designer than I am. And someone like that, it would be interesting to see how they view the footwear industry just from just a total creative standpoint. He's a real pure designer in terms of he just cares about doing cool work. It's not always about the business side. I think it's interesting to see a contrasting designer like that. Someone who would always do contract work, but probably wouldn't start their own business is like slightly different perspective.
And I always find it so fascinating to hear who leaders in our industries basically reference and talk about, because it's rare sometimes that as you get more senior, you almost get a bit stroke deprived, and people don't just put their arm around you metaphorically and say, hey, you know what, Mark, you're doing a really great job. I loved what you did with that thing. And that's actually part of the reason for that question, is just that ability for people who hear it or may not hear it, who even knows. But maybe somebody says in 6 months' time, oh, I heard Mark mentioning you on this podcast. And actually, then it's a nice way of bringing good karma into the world as well.
Yeah, it's good. It's hard to do, I think, for a lot of designers also. I've noticed, giving a compliment on somebody else's design is a very difficult thing. Everyone's a born critic. And also,
I reckon it's a fucking baller move to basically be like, you know what, that thing you did just moved me to tears. I think that is the ultimate thing. And as men, we should definitely do it more, because it's it's not that difficult. It doesn't take anything away from us. It's just saying, I've been moved by utility. I've been moved by beauty. And I think that is just being a good human. Don't you agree?
Oh, well, for sure. Of course. But I'm not always saying designers are the best humans either. I mean, I think when it comes to their work, they're very...
I'm not holding myself up as good guy here, Mark, either. I'm just basically throwing
my point would be that, designers are very critical. They're self-critical as well, but they have their point of view, and they find it a little bit hard to find the joy in someone else's point of view sometimes when it comes to their work. If I look outside my industry, I can see it. It's, whether it's cars or it's graphic design or something like that. There's stuff I love so much, and the work, it's always the same people. You can kind of see the consistency of their work, and you can kind of follow them. In footwear, there's a few, but there's not a lot of compliments given out, and I think in that in that world. Don't ask me what that is, but at least from my experience.
No, it really is. It has been an incredible sort of opportunity to just chat to you, Mark. So thank you so much, and I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you, Patrick. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks for listening to Light the Fuse. If this conversation got under your skin, please consider signing up for my newsletter. It's called Read the Room, and it's where you'll find out first what I think about the interviews and the themes that we've covered, and also where you'll find out first who's coming up next on the show. You can find out more and sign up at outrageousinsight.com/read the room.